The morning Adora left, she didn't say goodbye. She just folded her one good dress into the bottom of a plastic bag, tucked her daughter's birth certificate underneath it, and walked out while Zina was still sleeping. That was how Adora knew she was doing the right thing, because she couldn't look her daughter in the eye and explain it. Some decisions are too heavy to carry out loud. Zina was 7 years old. She had her father's nose and her grandmother's laugh and absolutely none of her mother's patience, which meant she would ask every single question about why they were leaving Accra, why they were going somewhere cold, why they couldn't just stay. So Adora left before the questions started. She would explain everything later, she told herself. She is still explaining. Zina was 31 years old now, or she would be in March, and she worked at a tailor shop in Brampton, Ontario, just off Kennedy Road, in a plaza that also had a West African grocery on one end and a phone repair kiosk in the middle that never seemed to have any customers. The tailor shop was called Mame's Alterations, though no one named Mame had owned it in at least a decade. The woman who owned it now was called Mrs. Achimpong, and she was a small, deliberate woman who spoke with the economy of someone who had once had a lot to say and decided most of it wasn't worth the breath. Mrs. Achimpong did not advertise. She did not have a website. She had a handwritten sign in the window, a landline that she answered herself, and a waiting list that stretched 4 to 6 weeks for anyone who wasn't a regular. Her work was that good, and she knew it, and she did not pretend otherwise. Zina had come to her looking for a job 3 years ago, carrying a portfolio of her own alterations and a letter of reference from a seamstress in Mississauga who had since retired. She had been working part-time at a fabric warehouse and doing alterations from her apartment, which worked fine until her landlord raised the rent, and her second-hand serger machine broke in the same week. She knocked on the door of Mame's Alterations on a Tuesday afternoon, portfolio under her arm, wearing the dress she had made herself from a bolt of kente-adjacent cotton. Not traditional kente, not the real thing, but the kind that said something without demanding attention. Mrs. Achimpong opened the door, looked at the dress first, and then at Zina's face. "Come in," she said. There was no interview, exactly. Mrs. Achimpong showed her a pile of garments that needed work and asked her to start. Zina sat down at the spare machine and worked for 2 hours while Mrs. Achimpong watched sometimes and, other times, pretended she wasn't watching. At the end of 2 hours, Mrs. Achimpong looked at what she had done and said, "You do invisible hems like someone taught you to be ashamed of your stitches," Zina said. "My mother taught me. She said the inside of a garment tells you everything about the person who made it." Mrs. Achimpong was quiet for a moment. "Your mother is right," she said. "Come back Thursday." That was how it started. The shop ran on a rhythm that Mrs. Achimpong had established long before Zina arrived and would not alter for anyone. Doors opened at 9. The first hour was for quiet work. No music, no talking unless necessary. After 10, the radio could go on, but low. Lunch was taken properly, at a table, not at the machine. And at 5:30, whatever was on the table stayed on the table until morning. "The work will be there tomorrow," Mrs. Achimpong said once, when Zina had offered to stay late to finish a hem. "You will also be there tomorrow, but tonight, go home." Zina went home. She had a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a house on a quiet street in Brampton, split with a roommate who worked night shifts at a warehouse and whom she therefore almost never saw except for brief, companionable exchanges in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. The apartment was clean and small and smelled like the lavender sachets she kept in the closet. On the wall above her sewing table, she had tacked a photograph of her mother. Not a recent one from when her mother was maybe 30, standing outside their house in Accra in a yellow wrapper, laughing at something outside the frame. Zina did not know what her mother was laughing at. She had asked, once. Adaora had said she couldn't remember. That bothered Zina in a way she couldn't quite articulate, that her mother had been that happy, open-mouthed, full-body happy, and couldn't remember why. The new hire came on a Wednesday, in late October. His name was Tobias, though he went by Tobi, and he was hired by Mrs. Achimpong without much fanfare or explanation, which was exactly how Mrs. Achimpong did everything. He appeared one morning in the workroom, wearing a plain white tee and dark jeans and carrying a notebook, and Mrs. Achimpong introduced him simply as someone who was learning. "Learning what?" Zina asked, not unpleasantly, after Mrs. Achimpong had gone back to the front of the shop. "Everything," Tobi said. He said it without arrogance, which surprised her. Just plainly, the way someone states a fact they've made peace with. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the quiet, attentive manner of someone who had been told to observe and had decided to take that seriously. He didn't come in asking questions or trying to prove himself useful before he understood what useful meant here. He just showed up, watched, and when Zina handed him something to do, sorting buttons by size, steaming a jacket, trimming loose threads, he did it without complaint or commentary. She noticed he wrote things in his notebook. Not constantly, not ostentatiously, but sometimes he would pause and write something down in the margins while she worked, like he was documenting a process. "You're taking notes," she said on his third day. "I learn better when I write things down," he said. "Does it bother you?" "No," she said. And it didn't. It was just unusual. Most people who came in to learn wanted to be handed the knowledge. They didn't think to write it down. She taught him how she had been taught. The inside of a garment tells you everything. She showed him how to read a seam, whether it had been rushed, whether the fabric had been respected, whether whoever made it had loved what they were doing, or just wanted it finished. She showed him how to match a plaid across a break in the fabric so the eye moved through the join without catching. She showed him how you press differently for wool than for cotton, how the iron is a conversation, not a command. Tobi listened. He wrote things in his notebook. He asked questions that were never stupid, which she appreciated. Not because she minded stupid questions, but because his questions were the kind that told her he had already thought before asking. At the end of his first week, Mrs. Achimpong stopped beside Zina's station and said quietly, so only she could hear, "You're a good teacher." "He's a good student," Zina said. Mrs. Achimpong looked at her for a moment, with an expression Zina couldn't fully read. Something between satisfaction and something older, something that knew more than it was saying, and then she went back to the front. November in Brampton goes gray early and stays gray. The light flattens out by 4 in the afternoon, and the cold comes in off the lake and settles into everything. The sidewalks, the parking lots, the inside of your coat when you leave it hanging too long by the door. Zina liked it, quietly. She had lived in cold long enough to stop fighting it. There was something honest about a sky that just went ahead and said what it meant. Tobi brought coffee on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Not as a performance, not to ingratiate himself, just because he passed the coffee shop on his way and had noticed she was always on her second cup by mid-morning. He brought it black because she drank it black, which meant he had paid attention before deciding to do something kind, and Zina found that more notable than the coffee itself. She did not ask him about himself. That was not her way. She figured people told you what they wanted you to know, and the rest wasn't your business until it was. He didn't ask about her either, at first. But by week 3, in the easy, accumulated quiet of 2 people working side by side, things began to come out naturally, the way they do, without anyone deciding to confide. She learned that he had grown up in Toronto, in a neighborhood he described with careful neutrality that she recognized as the tone of someone who had complicated feelings about a place they couldn't fully leave. That he had studied something unrelated to tailoring, something in business or finance, she didn't press, and that he had left it, or was leaving it, or was in the process of figuring out the distance between himself and it. "Why tailoring?" she asked once, genuinely curious. He was quiet for a moment, cutting along a chalk line with the precision she had taught him. "I wanted to learn how to make something that lasted," he said. "Something you could hold." She understood that. She didn't say so, but she understood it. She told him small things in return. That she had come to Canada at 7. That she had learned to sew from watching her mother and then from doing. That she had worked 3 jobs in her early 20s and saved to buy her first machine secondhand from a woman in Scarborough who had run a dressmaking school out of her basement for 40 years. Her name was Mrs. Darko, Zina said. She didn't want money for the machine. She wanted to know what I was going to make with it. "What did you say?" "I said I was going to make what needed making." Tobi smiled at that. A real one, not performed. "She sold it to you?" "She gave it to me," Zina said. "And told me to come back when I had made something worth showing her. Did you?" "I came back with a coat," Zina said. "She put it on, and wore it for the rest of the afternoon. Didn't say a word about it. That was the review." He laughed, and Zina, who did not usually find things funny before noon, laughed too. It was Mrs. Achimpong who first mentioned the community gala. It was a fundraiser organized every year by the Ghanaian Canadian Association. A formal dinner and auction held in December at an event hall in Mississauga. Mrs. Achimpong had made dresses for 3 of the organizers for the past several years, and each year the requests came in as though time were irrelevant, as though 12 weeks of work could be squeezed into 4. This year, one of the organizers had asked if Mrs. Achimpong could make a custom piece for the gala's keynote speaker, a woman who was flying in from London, a public health doctor of some prominence in the Ghanaian diaspora community. The organizer had sent Mrs. Achimpong a brief, a fabric reference, and a photograph. Mrs. Achimpong read the brief twice and set it down on Zina's station without comment. Zina picked it up, read it, set it down. "That's a 6-week commission in 3 weeks," she said. "Yes," said Mrs. Achimpong, "with a fitting across time zones. The doctor is coming to Toronto for a conference first," Mrs. Achimpong said. "There will be one in-person fitting. The rest is correspondence." Zina looked at the fabric reference. It was a specific kente silk blend, traditional Asante strip weaving, constructed into broader cloth, and the silhouette the organizer described was an asymmetrical wrap with an open shoulder, formal but not stiff, celebratory without being costume. It was exactly the kind of thing Zina had been doing in her head for years. "Will you lead it?" Mrs. Achimpong said. Zina looked up. "Me? You?" said Mrs. Achimpong, as if it were not a question, as if she had already decided and was only waiting for Zina to catch up. "What about you?" Zina said. "I have 3 bridesmaids' dresses and a graduation suit," Mrs. Achimpong said. "You will lead this one. I will be here." That evening, Zina stayed late for the first time. Not because Mrs. Achimpong asked her to, but because she needed to sit with the commission in the quiet and let it settle into something she could work with. She sketched for 2 hours at her station, filling a notepad with variations, rejecting most of them, circling back, erasing, starting again. At some point, she became aware that Tobi was still there too, sitting at the steaming table, not working, just present. "You can go," she said. "I know," he said. "Do you want me to?" She thought about it. "No," she said. He didn't ask to look at the sketches. He just sat there while she worked, which was, she realized, exactly what she would have wanted without knowing it. The next 3 weeks were the kind of work that takes over a life without apology. Tobi was with her through all of it. He became indispensable in the way that people do when they pay attention. Not by doing everything, but by doing the right things at the right moment. He sourced the fabric from a textile dealer in Mississauga that he had somehow found and negotiated with, which impressed her more than she let on. He organized her reference materials without being asked. When she was deep in a pattern problem, trying to make the asymmetrical shoulder work without distorting the kente's directionality, he sat across from her with his notebook and asked questions that weren't about tailoring, questions that made her talk through the problem out loud until she found the solution herself. "You did that on purpose," she said when she realized. "Did what?" he said. She gave him a look. He smiled and said nothing. The in-person fitting happened on a Thursday, 3 days before the gala. The doctor, whose name was Dr. Serena Asante Boateng, whose presence filled a room without effort, arrived at the shop at 11 in the morning with an assistant and the particular calm of someone who had long since learned to save her energy for what mattered. She put on the half-finished piece. Zina watched her face in the mirror. Dr. Asante Boateng stood still for a moment. Then she turned, slowly, looking at the fall of the fabric over her shoulder, the way the kente strip caught the light along the weft. "Who made this?" she said. "I did," Zina said. Dr. Asante Boateng looked at her in the mirror, really looked at her. "How long have you been doing this?" "My whole life," Zina said. "Professionally, 8 years. Where did you train?" "Here," Zina said. "And before that, from my mother, and before that, from watching." Dr. Asante Boateng was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The inside of the seam, can I see?" Zina lifted the hem and showed her. The inside of the garment was as clean and intentional as the outside. Every seam finished, every join invisible. Dr. Asante Boateng looked at it for a long time. Then she let the fabric fall and said quietly to her assistant, "Write down her name." The gala was on a Saturday. Zina was not there. It wasn't her world, those events, and she had not been invited. She delivered the finished dress on Friday morning, pressed and covered and boxed, and went home and cleaned her apartment and tried not to think about it. She didn't sleep well. On Sunday, she went into the shop to get ahead of Monday's work. She was the only one there, or thought she was, until she heard the door and Mrs. Achimpong came in, which was unusual. Mrs. Achimpong did not come in on Sundays. She set a box down on Zina's station, a bakery box tied with string. "Sit down," she said. Zina sat. Mrs. Achimpong sat across from her. She took a moment, the way she always did when something mattered, not to delay it, but to make sure the words were right. "Dr. Asante Boateng wore your dress to the gala," she said. "People asked about it." She told them. Specifically, she told the woman who organizes a design residency for African diaspora textile artists in Toronto. The residency is funded privately. The stipend is significant. Mrs. Achimpong paused. "You have been recommended." Zina did not say anything. "It is not an offer yet," Mrs. Achimpong said. "There is an application, a portfolio review. But the recommendation came from Dr. Asante Boateng directly, which is, it is meaningful, significantly meaningful." "Why are you telling me on a Sunday?" Zina said. "Because I could not wait until Monday," Mrs. Achimpong said, and that from Mrs. Achimpong was a declaration. On Monday, Tobi was already there when Zina arrived, which was unusual. She was almost always first. He was standing at his station, not working, and when she came in, he turned and she could see immediately that he knew something. His face was doing a thing it didn't usually do, something unguarded. "I need to tell you something," he said. She set her bag down. "All right." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father is the private funder for the residency." The room was very still. "His name is Walter Antwi," Tobi said. "He runs a foundation. It funds things he believes in, arts and cultural programs, mostly diaspora work. He has funded the residency for 7 years. He paused. He asked me to come here, to learn, but also to watch. He wanted to know if the shop was what he had heard it was, whether Mrs. Achimpong was who people said she was, whether the work being done here was worth, whether it was real. He stopped. Then, he didn't know you were here. I didn't know either. Not at first. Not like that. Zina looked at him. Technically, she said, you've been observing this place on behalf of your father's foundation. Yes, he said. He didn't qualify it. And when did it become something other than that? He looked at her steadily. Around the second Tuesday, when you showed me how to read a seam. The shop was quiet. Outside, Kennedy Road was doing what Kennedy Road did. Continuous, indifferent, the sound of a city that doesn't pause for anything. I should have told you sooner, he said. Yes, she said. You should have. I know, he said. I'm sorry. She was quiet for a long moment, not performing the silence but genuinely moving through it. She thought about the coffee he had brought on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the way he had sat with her in the quiet those 3 weeks, while she worked. The questions that weren't about tailoring. The way he had found the fabric dealer and said nothing about it being a favor of any kind. She thought about what her mother had told her, once, years ago, about the difference between someone doing good for you and someone doing good near you. The first kind knows they're doing it. The second kind just can't help it. The inside of a garment tells you everything, she said finally. He looked at her, waiting. Your inside has been clean, she said, whatever the outside looked like when you walked in. He exhaled, slowly, like someone who had been holding something in for weeks. The application for the residency took 3 weeks to prepare. Zina worked on it in the evenings, at her apartment, at the table under the photograph of her mother in the yellow wrapper. She wrote about her training, her work, her intentions. She submitted photographs of the gala dress and 4 other pieces, including the coat she had made 22 years ago, that Mrs. Darko had worn without comment. She called her mother while she was filling out the application. Adaora answered on the 3rd ring the way she always did, as if she had been waiting but didn't want to seem like she had been waiting. Mama, Zina said, I want to tell you something. She told her everything. About the commission, about the dress, about the recommendation, about the residency, about Tobi, and who his father was and what that meant and didn't mean, about the application. Her mother was quiet for a long time when she finished. The dress, Adora said finally, the inside seam. You showed her? She asked, Zina said, and she understood it. She did. Another silence. Then her mother said softly, I used to make you watch me sew when you were small. You never wanted to sit still. I had to bribe you with groundnuts. Zina laughed. I remember the groundnuts. I don't remember the watching. You watched, Adaora said. You just didn't know you were learning. After she hung up, Zina sat for a while at the table in the quiet apartment. The lavender sachets in the closet, the photograph of her mother laughing at something she couldn't remember, the sound of the city outside, muffled by the December cold. She looked at the photograph for a long time, and she thought, we carry things without knowing we're carrying them. Skills and grief, and the particular way our mothers laughed. We bring them across oceans in plastic bags, tucked under birth certificates. We hand them out without meaning to anyone who sits still long enough to receive them. That is what it means to make something that lasts. Not the garment, the passing of it. The residency letter arrived in February, on a Tuesday, in a plain envelope. No fanfare, just a name and an address and a sentence that said, in the plain, unhurried language of something that knows it doesn't need decoration, we are pleased to offer you a place. Zina read it standing at her kitchen counter, still in her coat. She read it twice. Then she set it down and put the kettle on, because that was what you did, and while she waited for the water to boil, she looked out the window at the gray Brampton morning and said nothing at all. Some things are too full for words right at the beginning. She called her mother. She called Mrs. Achimpong. She did not call Tobi, because Tobi was already at the shop, and she would tell him in person, because some things deserve a face. Before she left for work, she looked up at the photograph of her mother. Yellow wrapper, open-mouthed, full body happy, laughing at something she could not remember. And for the first time, Zina thought, it doesn't matter what she was laughing at. It only matters that she was. If this story touched something in you, something about work, or patience, or the things we inherit without being told, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell us, was there someone in your life who taught you something without knowing they were teaching you? We would love to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Ancient African Folktales. We tell these stories every week because they deserve to be told.